excited to be here. Ready to serve the marginalized out here.
Good.
We've done a substantial amount of work helping those in lower income individuals and those who,
And also president of
God love your soul. That's why we're on this earth. We're supposed to take care of others. I run a nonprofit, we're kind of the nonprofit, Mission Bay. It's called Family House. We provide free temporary housing for low-income people whose kids have cancer and are being treated at UCSF. So we house 80 families
Oh, I'm like 13 years in Catholic school, plus Chinese,
from
like.
our supervisors. The sidewalks are horrible here, and so is public safety. So we need someone who pays
You know, like just
if people rely on us, people want to show up,
like it's weird, it's weird, it's weird.
We're just 2 blocks away. Yeah.
The microphone.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great, great. Well, welcome everybody. Hello, I'm Francesca Vega. I'm the Vice Chancellor of Community and Government Relations here at UCSF. On behalf of UCSF Chancellor Sam Hawgood, I warmly welcome you to Genentech Hall at UCSF's Mission Bay campus. And for those of you that are viewing from home, such as myself, via Zoom or SFGovTV, good evening and thank you so much for tuning in. We're here tonight for the District 6 Supervisorial Candidate Forum presented by UCSF, the Office of Community and Government Relations, and the San Francisco League of Women Voters, who has really been such an amazing partner. So thank you so much. This is a nonpartisan voter forum intended to help members of the UCSF community, our Mission Bay neighbors, and of course all of District 6 residents make an informed and educated decision when they cast their ballots on November 8th. In keeping with the nonpartisan atmosphere, please do not distribute or display any campaign materials until you are off campus. I want to take a moment to also thank our candidates. One, I want to thank you for your bravery. I want to thank you for your passion and for your commitment to San Francisco and the residents of District 6. I also want to, of course, recognize that you have taken the time to speak tonight to our in-person and virtual audiences and to make your case for why you should represent District 6. So thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge, of course, our co-hosts. So the San Francisco League of Women Voters have been a wonderful partner to UCSF throughout the years. You know, as organizations that are so deeply rooted in the city, both UCSF and the League have worked tirelessly to promote educated and informed civic engagement year-round. The League has been a go-to partner for us. So again, thank you all for your time and for your commitment. You know, this is a time when human rights are under attack across our country, and it truly is more important than ever that San Francisco shines as an example of democracy in action. San Francisco and California, without question. Ahead of every election, UCSF works to ensure our campus community of more than 30,000 students, staff, and faculty are fully engaged. And this is a great opportunity to acknowledge Abigail Ellis, who is our Director of Advocacy, and Scott Carlson, who is part of our advocacy team, in really ensuring that we're putting our best foot forward to engage our community and to advocate for those issues that are so important to the mission of the University of California and UCSF. For more information on the upcoming election and resources, I ask you to please visit ucsf.edu/vote, ucsf.edu/vote. Since UCSF's founding 150 years ago, we have had a deeply collaborative partnership with the city and county of San Francisco to serve our residents, but there's always more to do. And that is a space that, of course, I am excited about pushing boundaries, about doing more to reach in and reach out to our community. From the 1,500 UCSF faculty that work in Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital, which is managed by San Francisco's Department of Public Health, to the Memorandum of Understanding with the city to provide a wealth of community benefits as part of our modernization project, our flagship campus at Parnassus Heights. And finally, to right here in District 6, where we collaborate with the city through citywide case management, the largest provider of intensive case management services in San Francisco. Regardless who wins this election, UCSF is excited and eager to work with the District 6 supervisor to continue our proud history. And again, let's up the ante together. Let's lean in together and how we can leverage the anchor institution that is UCSF for the residents of District 6 and the residents of San Francisco. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the San Francisco League of Women Voters Vice President of Voter Services, Danielle Dibler. So thank you again for joining us this evening.
Good evening, and welcome to the Candidate Forum for the 2022 District 6 San Francisco Board of Supervisors election. I'm Danielle Deibler, the VP of Voter Services for the League of Women Voters of San Francisco. The League of Women Voters of San Francisco is a nonprofit, nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in the government. The League never supports or opposes candidates. However, we do take stands on some issues. I'd like to do a quick land acknowledgement, and then I'll be introducing our president, who's going to be the moderator for this evening's event. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramatash Ohlone peoples, who are the original inhabitants of San Francisco. As the indigenous stewards of this land, the Ramatash Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their sacred obligations and responsibilities. We recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland, and we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples of this land. The League is committed to providing the resources that voters need to exercise your most fundamental right to democracy, voting. Please remember that you must be registered to vote by October 24th. You can also register same day, but it's a little bit of a pain. All registered voters will be mailed a ballot in early October, and options for in-person voting will be available both early and on November 8th, which is the election day. Please visit our website in the coming weeks at lwvsf.org/vote, where you will find all the voter resources that we offer. The League, again, is a nonprofit organization. If you'd like to support our work and free events such as this one, please become a member or donate at our website, lwvsf.org. I'm very pleased to introduce Allison Go, our moderator tonight. She's the current president of the League of Women Voters of San Francisco, and prior to her role as her president, she served as the president of Voter Services and the Pro-Con Guide chair. Allison is passionate about voter education, voting rights, and women's representation in elected office, and her career has been dedicated to political campaigns and social justice issues. In her spare time, Allison enjoys running through Golden Gate Park, trying local craft beers, and introducing her baby to all the delicious cuisines of San Francisco. Thank you, Allison. Welcome.
Thanks, Danielle, and welcome to the candidates for the San Francisco District 6 Board of Supervisors. The candidates today will have a chance to present their views on issues affecting the city and to answer questions about those issues that were submitted in advance for tonight's forum. First, I'd like to remind you of our ground rules. Responses to questions should be on the issues and the policy related. Candidates are expected to be respectful of other candidates and asked to not make personal attacks on other individuals. Here are the procedures for this forum. The candidates will have the opportunity to make a 90-second opening and closing statements. Opening statements will be in alphabetical order by first name, and closing statements will be in reverse alphabetical order by first name. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer questions, and the order of answering each question will be rotated among the candidates. Each candidate will have the opportunity to answer the same number of questions. Any rebuttals may be included in the candidate's closing statement, which will be 90 seconds. Our League members sitting in the front will be providing you with a visual indication of the remaining time for response. Green means 1 minute, yellow means 15 seconds, and red means stop. Every aspect of the forum will be equally fair to all candidates. Thank you to our attendees tonight, both virtual and in person. For those who are attending online, you are in listen-only mode. The Q&A and chat features are not active. This forum will be recorded and made available on our website, our YouTube channel, and on SFGovTV cable channels. You have many important decisions to make on November 8th, and tonight's forum will give you an opportunity to learn before you vote. So let's begin. We will start off with 90-second opening statements in alphabetical order. So welcome, candidates, and thank you for participating this evening. So please introduce yourself. Tell us which neighborhood you live in and why you are running for District 6 Supervisor. And to start, I'm going to start with Ms. Billy Cooper.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miss Billy Cooper, and I am a 63-year-old.
Ms. Billy, if you could use the microphone.
Do I need it? Oh.
We have virtual attendees, so the
Hi,
microphones.
everyone. My name is Miss Billy Cooper, and I am a 63-year-old unapologetically black transgendered woman, and I have lived in District 6 for 40 years. My whole existence has been in a Tenderloin until we were redistricted into District 5. The Tenderloin became District 5. So I had to move south of Market, but I lived south of Market before. But I have been a long-time activist and advocate. I'm a long-time survivor living with HIV, and I've been clean and sober 20 years. And I believe it's time for a change in my district. I've been doing street politics the whole time. You know, I came to San Francisco in 1982 and hit the streets running because of all the confusion and anger and segregation and just the whole gamut in the Tenderloin and oppression and, you know, and homeless people on the streets. We pretty much have the same issues in the Tenderloin now that were going on 40 years ago. And it's time for a change. And I am that change. My name is Miss Billy Cooper, and I hope to win your vote, or hi out there, your vote out there, people in TV land, because I know what we need.
Thank you, Miss Billy Cooper. The next candidate we'll hear from in our opening statements is Sherelle.
Good afternoon. My name is Sherelle Jackson, and I'm running for Board of Supervisor District 6. You know, I'm dedicated and committed to serving our underserved and marginalized communities, to be a strong voice for this district. I want to serve our seniors, our disabled communities, as well as those that are veterans. I also want to continue to make sure that you have an understanding of the work in my background. Some of that work includes being a member of SEI 10-1, working with labor and ensuring that they have an advocate in that regard, co-chair of Workers with Disabilities, the Women's Committee, as well as the AFRAM Committee as well, serving on the Social Economics Committee. I do a lot of work, community activism here in the city, making sure our homeless individuals have the resources that they need in order to thrive and placed in good housing. And so I've done a substantial amount of work, being the executive producer of Rosemount Podcast as well, and just really making sure that I provide some of my time to help those who need it the most, and ensure that we can continue to uplift folks where they're at. Thank you.
Next, I'll go to Honey Mahogany.
Thank you. I'm Honey Mahogany. I'm also running for District 6 Supervisor. I grew up here in San Francisco, but my family actually did not. They came to this country, like many others, as refugees from a long war. My father at the time was a medical student studying in Greece, and he protested against the Ethiopian government, which revoked his citizenship. He lost his scholarship, lost everything, and he and my mother came to San Francisco seeking refuge and to build a new life. And when they came here, they really believed in the American dream. That is, that through hard work and education, you can do anything. That's why my dad, instead of being able to continue his work in medical school, none of his credits transferred, he worked for 30 years as a taxi driver to put his kids through school. And they sent us to Catholic school because my family was deeply religious, but also because they thought it was the best way for us to move forward. And while I didn't agree with everything the Catholics taught, what I did agree with was the teaching of being a person for others, being of service, and being the change you want to see in the world. That's what drove me to become a social worker. I got my MSW from UC Berkeley, and I've been working to get folks off the streets and into care, getting folks into recovery, and helping those who are formerly incarcerated rebuild their lives. That's why I have done the work over the last 20 years to help make San Francisco a better place, working to establish the cultural districts, saving our small businesses, and much, much more. With everything that's happening across the country right now, we need San Francisco to continue to be a refuge for people, not just people coming here from all over the country, or all over the world, but also from other places in this country.
Thank you. And finally, for opening statements, we'll have Matt Dorsey.
Thank you so much. You know, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, and also I really want to thank UCSF because it's a little bit personal for me. One of the proudest things that I ever did in San Francisco politics was in 2019 when I had the opportunity to stand shoulder to shoulder with some UCSF leaders like Stan Glantz and Valerie Yerger and John Ma to take on Jewel Labs when they were spending millions of dollars to change San Francisco law so they could sell vaping devices. It means a lot to be here. It was the convergence of a public health crisis in drug overdose deaths, in my own personal journey in recovery from addiction, that moved me to ask Mayor London Breed to consider me as her appointee to the Board of Supervisors for a job I never thought I would want, let alone have. But having the opportunity to be here gives me, I think, a rare and unique voice on the Board of Supervisors against the backdrop of a record-shattering crisis that is twice as deadly as COVID-19. I have said that I'm not going to be a single-issue supervisor or a single-issue candidate. But if there is a single issue that could make progress on a multitude of things in San Francisco, getting more people into recovery would make a meaningful difference and enable our city to be worthy of being the city of St. Francis. Thanks.
Thank you all. Now we'll move into the questions that were submitted by the audience in advance. How do you define affordable housing? And what specific actions will you take to increase affordable housing in District 6? And for this question, I will begin with Sherelle.
How do I fund housing? We need to make sure that it's affordable. For me, in my perspective, I'm looking at working class and lower income individuals and making sure that when the jobs that they are obtaining, can they afford housing in that regard? And if they can't, that means we need to make more of it available. And that is a mile marker in my respect, especially for our seniors and lower income individuals who have a hard time obtaining housing because it's at market rate, because of their fixed incomes. And so I want to ensure that we provide enough housing that's available for them to obtain it, and it needs to be affordable. Thank you.
Go ahead, Honey Mahogany.
Thank you for that question. Truly, for me, affordable housing means when working class people or poor people can afford to live there, that's what's affordable housing. I know this deeply because my family, again, came here as refugees with nothing. And when they came here in the late 70s, that was possible. They were able to find a small apartment in the Sunset and crammed, 4 or 5 of my family members in there, and then me and my brother were born, and my grandmother came to live with us, but we were able to get by. Unfortunately, today, that's not the case. I don't know how people do it now. I mean, we are still getting refugees from across the country, but more and more we're getting more trans people who are coming to San Francisco seeking to rebuild their lives. I mean, I just met someone the other day who said, yeah, I came here from Alabama because I was not safe back home. And for me, it is deeply concerning that we do not have enough affordable housing in San Francisco, and we do need to build more housing at all levels, but the city needs to also take into consideration how it's building deeply affordable housing here. It's been my life work. As executive director of the Trans District, I fought to get more deeply affordable housing and rental subsidies into here in San Francisco. When I was chief of staff at the Board of Supervisors, we also fought for legislation that we passed, making sure that those who live in SROs pay no more than 30% of their income towards their rent. So I've worked on a variety of different things to ensure that San Francisco is as affordable as possible, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I define affordable housing the way that the state defines affordable housing, and I think it's worthwhile of looking at what the regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, targets that are going to be governing how we're going to build housing over the next 8 years as part of our compliant 6-cycle housing element is going to do that. There's very low housing, which is about 50% of AMI, or area medium income. It goes to low income, which is 50 to 80%. Moderate income, which is about 80 to 120. And then sometimes, in Prop D, it can go up to as high as 140. I think sometimes we need the flexibility of that because we don't know when we're baking something into the charter how the economy is going to be in years to come. But we have very aggressive targets. And as District 6 supervisor, one of the things that I said in my very first speech after being sworn in, it's not enough as a District 6 supervisor to be a reliable vote on housing. The District 6 supervisor has an obligation to be the conscience of housing for the entire Board of Supervisors. If we're going to fulfill the promise of the most progressive and ambitious housing element ever in this city, We have to make sure that we're building and supporting housing not just in our own district, but also in every district at all income levels. And we're also meeting the aggressive targets of affordability that the state has set. So I'm committed as supervisor to making sure we fulfill the promise of the most progressive housing element in San Francisco history.
And the last to answer questions is Ms. Billy Cooper.
Hi, everyone. Low-income housing is what we need. Poor people cannot afford affordable housing. That's number one. Because I am one of those people. And until I got a Section 8 voucher to afford a beautiful place in Trinity Apartments, Trinity Places, that's how I'm living there. I couldn't afford that. Affordable housing is a pushback to poor and low-income people. You know, most people that live in all this affordable housing are tech people, or you go from 3rd and Market all the way up to Castro and Market, all that is affordable housing, BMRs. A poor person can't afford a BMR, so I just want to say, I know exactly what's happening. My street politics, I'm an activist and an advocate. Like I said, for over 40 years, I am the face of the Tenderloin. I am one of many faces of the Tenderloin. Let's not forget, we can't forget all the other communities in District 6, but we got to stop leaving out the marginalized and the poor people. We have to get them situated in housing. During this COVID scare, so many people were on the streets right outside City Hall, sleeping up on a pallet and a mattress, and sometimes not even sleeping in a tent. Just because you're not there, that doesn't mean you shouldn't care for people living below the poverty line.
Thank you all. I'm going to ask the audience to hold the applause until the very end. Thank you. So question number 2. What are your plans for bringing retail business to the area? For this one, I'll begin with Honey Mahogany.
Thank you so much. I think everyone here should know that San Francisco has been hit really hard by the pandemic, but even before the pandemic happened, small businesses were really struggling. The rents are just too high, and unfortunately, foot traffic isn't what it used to be, and it's not enough to support those rents. I know this deeply as a small business owner. I'm one of the co-owners of The Stud, and in order to save that small business, 16 friends and myself got together, put the funds together to save that business from closure. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, we were forced to shut our doors, but we're actively working to bring it back. Unfortunately, there's a lot of issues when it comes to zoning and permitting and all the costs that it takes to actually open a small business. When it costs more than half a $500,000 to open an ice cream shop in this city, that is a problem. That's something that we need to work on. And so I am going to continue the work that I have been doing as a small business advocate, working with the Small Business Commission, working with the Office of Economic and Workforce Development to make sure that we are taking the burden off of our small businesses. That's why I opposed the previous tax that was about to be on the ballot, and luckily it's getting removed. But we have been taxing and hurting our small businesses to the point where they are no longer allowed to survive. We have to do something about it, and we have to absolutely change the conditions on our streets to support our small businesses, increase tourism, increase foot traffic through restructuring of our streets, and get people back into our small businesses and shops.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So what I'm hearing from small business owners in District 6 is that the main concern is public safety on the street. It is street conditions, it's people who are acting out violently. In many cases, especially in my neighborhood, I live in the mid-market area. It's open-air drug scenes, brazen drug dealing, and people acting out, often violently. There's the owner of Harvest Market, a friend of mine I've known for 20 years, who was attacked and knocked unconscious. This was something that we haven't seen in prior years. Mark Sackett, who works a block away at the Box, had just had surgery on his wrist. He's talked about this openly. He was attacked because he told somebody to stop kicking a door. Tony Baloney's wife was attacked because she told someone to stop shoplifting. It's a degree of public safety issues that I have not seen in the 14 years that I've been living in South of Market. I think we also have to, I think the other thing that I have talked to large companies about is what we can do to encourage people to come back and to stop doing remote work. I know that we are a tech-heavy city, and sometimes that plays out in this being a labor kind of work benefit. But I have said I'm willing to open up the hood on the gross receipts tax if it means incentivizing people to come back to work, because ultimately that's what supports small businesses.
Hi again, it's Miss Billy Cooper. I am running for District 6 Supervisor. I want to talk about policy, and I want to talk about legislation, and I want to talk about, you know, there are people that do and there are people that don't. And for the last 40 years, the city and county of San Francisco has not gotten it right because people of color, white people, Asian people, Mexican people, no, there are no businesses for low-income, marginalized people. You know, they said the cities, I spoke to someone with the city, and they said, Ms. Cooper, they need seed money. A poor person don't have no seed money to start a business. The city needs to create, you know, legislation and policy to afford people to get to be able to open a business. I've been here 40 years, and I've seen black people and brown people working in a business, but that what they was just doing, working there. They didn't own nothing. So I just said we got to make it more cohesive and equal to everybody, and not only in District 6, but across the city. We have to help people that really want to help themselves but can't. So many people can't afford a decent meal. I was one of those people, but when I got my housing, my life changed, and I'm so grateful. I'm a United States disabled veteran. That's how I got my Section 8 voucher, and I'm so grateful.
All right, so we got to hit this in multiple different ways, okay? So we've got to create tax incentives that help out businesses, especially those that are impacted by the pandemic. We also need to ensure that we start to invest back into business and create a way in which they feel supported so that they are able to obtain the resources they need in order to thrive and make sure that their businesses are running efficiently, especially for those defaults. We also need to ensure that that we are addressing community safety. I heard another candidate mention that, and I think I agree with that. You do need to address safety as well. This is one of the things that is a concern is those that are in organized crime that kind of affects the retail industry, especially when you're thinking about the square and these things. You have to address those in a way that you're providing community safety, making sure that the staff inside the retail industry. I worked in retail before. I know what happens inside those stores, and sometimes it's not the very safe conditions for them to be able to conduct business. And so we have to ensure that their security is in place, but also investment in our community safety ambassadors are available, ensuring that they have the resources they need, and then making sure that those resources are available for impact, right? So making sure there's grants available when folks need them for marginalized and lower income small businesses that need those resources so they can start up. There's a lot that we can do in the way that we address this, so thank you.
Thank you. Next question. Could the city create a bus route that goes from Mission Bay to SFO Airport? For this one, I'm going to begin with Matt Dorsey.
I think that we could do that. I know that one of the things that plays out in transit so often in the San Francisco Bay Area is that we have 27 transit agencies, and there is a lot of balkanization in that. I think that there are, I mean, this is the first, actually this is kind of refreshing, because it's the first time I've gotten a question that is kind of novel. Yeah, this is something that I would be willing to have a conversation with Jeff Tumlin about at Muni, or private sector. I know that there are some private sector shuttles here as well, but if that's something that would be helpful to this area. I am a strong believer in what we need to do here in Mission Bay. Back in the .com era, I worked on Berry Street when this was a place where people were hitting golf balls. You know, I remember this being a place where Frank Jordan, I think it was the Jordan administration, was talking to UCSF about some of the growth issues they were encountering on their Parnassus campus. And the discussion was, maybe we should look at Mission Bay. And I think this is fulfilling the promise of an area that is a life sciences cluster, and I am committed to making this a success. So if a shuttle to SFO would do that, or any kind of transportation infrastructure, I'm committed to it, just as I'm committed to the Mission Bay Elementary School.
Is that my question too?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Billy Cooper.
I just want to say that would be a gangbuster. That would be a fabulous idea, because so many people that live beyond UCSF and Gentech and all these buildings right here and all these fabulous apartments and Giant Stadium who live further down 3rd Street, most of those people can't afford $16 one way in a shuttle to go to the airport. I remember before all this was here, the historical 15 bus used to come down 3rd Street, used to come down this street. I remember I used to eat across the street at the firehouse before they tore it down, where the sisters used to prepare meals for the low, poor, marginalized people. This is my neighborhood. This is my neck of the woods. I have done street politics, and I'm just waiting to get in City Hall as District 6 supervisor, honey, because they really need to be taught a lesson about how to run things. But it would be fabulous, because I'm disabled and I love taking the BART to the airport, and it's half price, $4 each way. So I would actually come down here to catch the bus to go to the airport, because it's an experience for low, marginalized, poor people to actually be able to afford to fly out of the airport. So that's a fabulous, fabulous idea. And if you need my help, I'm here, I'm available. If you need someone to sit on the board. And that's another thing. We need marginalized and poor people on some of these boards. How you going to create stuff for us if we're not on your board?
Thank you. Next, Pharrell. Yes. The question is, could the city create a bus route that goes from Mission Bay to SFO Airport?
So my answer is probably a bit more simple than that. I would say that, yes, I think it's a great idea. A lot of folks do a lot of business back and forth. You've got companies and industries that have to get to where they're going, and this may be an efficient way to reduce traffic. Think about the environment. Think about how that it will reduce the amount of traffic back and forth and everything else. If there's a route that's directly for those that are residents that are here in the city and in this district. I also think that we also need to ensure that we're looking at transit and public transit in general, ensuring that there are safer routes so that our care providers can get to and from the hospitals, ensure that they continue to have investment there, and also making sure that, I know that there's some work in regards to the Chase Center, which is down the street here, that, when there's games and everything else, that could be a concern. So I just wanted to make sure that we also ensure that we continue to make safe routes for those that are getting the care that they need. Thanks.
Yes, so I believe that is possible and something we absolutely can do. I would actually, though, prioritize making transit more reliable in San Francisco and in District 6. BART already goes straight to SFO, so why are we not then actually making access to BART easier by improving how often Muni comes, whether it be the T line or whatever it is, the N. We know that there is transit that connects Mission Bay to the downtown area. We just need to make sure that it is reliable and that it's coming quickly enough. So rather than start a new shuttle, I would prefer to actually reinvest in the resources that exist to make them reliable, more consistent, come more quickly, so that folks can get to SFO safely.
Thank you all for your answers. Just as a reminder, these questions have been submitted by the audience in advance. So the next question, do you accept PAC funding from outside California? And if so, from who and why? I will begin with Miss Billy Cooper.
No, I don't. I don't accept no PAC funding. Matter of fact, I don't even know what it is. But no, running for District 6 supervisor, we have a threshold. You can only take so much money from donors, and you're not allowed to take money from corporations and other outside entities. But I wish I could have, but you know, c'est la vie. But no, I think there should be some kind of policy, and we should relook the structure of when people run for District 6 supervisor. In any district, you should be able to get more money from you, someone that backs you and wants to fund you. Because I don't have a whole lot of money. I might lose this race, but I know my heart has always been in the right place for 63 years. And if I'm lucky enough to win, I will do everything within my breath, everything while I'm living and at District 6 supervisor to help the poor, marginalized people. I know other people that got money live in District 6 and need help too, but my heart is with my people that look like me. I have stage 4 cancer. I have one eye. So many disabled people are kicked to the curb because there's no one that looks like them that represent them. But I'm here to say, I know I gotta stop. I'm here to say, I am for my peeps.
Thank you. Sherelle Jackson?
So I haven't been taking any money in regards to out of state. Is that what it was? I'm very modest, so that's just not something I'm doing. And I'm just trying to run a good race, decent leader with integrity, with honesty and respect for the folks that are running next to me, and we'll continue to make sure that the rest of this race is respectful, and I want to run it that way. And hopefully, other people can take this as an example in a way that you see a black woman up here that can run without being disrespectful or unkind to other folks, and just continue to represent in that way. So thank you.
For me, the vast majority of my contributions, in fact, all of them have come from individual donors. The only exceptions have been from unions who have contributed to my campaign, but also there are some national and statewide organizations that have endorsed me and that have contributed $500. For example, California Women's List has contributed $500. Other organizations that may be endorsing, like the Victory Institute or Fund, which is a national organization, they may contribute $500, and I would, yes, accept that. But there are organizations and groups that I will not accept money for. Obviously, those on the far right wing, those who are serial evictors, people who are private prison companies, things of that nature, private oil companies. There are certain things that are or groups that I will not accept money from. But again, a vast majority are all coming from either individuals or labor unions.
And my donors are also largely individuals. I think to the extent there could be something out of state, it might be a couple labor union endorsements that I've gotten, where I've gotten checks, but I believe most of those are also from in-state. So I would happily take a look at that. I certainly haven't solicited anything from out of state. And most of the fundraising that I have been doing is among people that I've known for years, and it's the early round is usually the love money. So that's it for me.
Thank you all.
What was the end that you said there?
So they'll call it sometimes in fundraising circles love money. It's just like your friends.
I'm
going
to move on to the next question. Thank you. So, what is your comprehensive plan to address public health? I'm going to begin with Sherelle Jackson.
Yeah, so this is also something that we have to hit to ensure that, well, number one, that we're making sure that our diverse and disadvantaged communities have the access to care, making sure that mental health is being addressed and resources to access to care is available. I also want to make sure that our seniors have access to health care and making sure that it's accessible to them, especially our disabled and vulnerable communities who need access to that care. And also women and Black women who may feel sometimes uncomfortable with these conversations about getting access to care and going to hospitals and getting care when they need it the most. And I want to make sure that organizations that are available and are providing those resources, that they're getting to the communities that need them. and that women feel more comfortable with that, and just having that representation be available to them all. So definitely want to ensure we get the access to care in that regard. Mhm.
Yes, well, there's a lot that needs to be done to improve our public health care system. This is something that I have worked on extensively, both as chief of staff to the former supervisor, Matt Haney, but also as someone who, has had to access public health services. As a Black trans woman, we do know that there's a lot of very specific care that we need in our community. And luckily here in San Francisco, we have that covered. Unfortunately, with that care, as long as a long list of other types of healthcare, mental health care, et cetera, the waits are often far too long and in some cases can be deadly. I think that this is actually what is creating the crisis in our streets. We know, my partner worked for years at General as a nurse in the mental health, in the psych ward, and he would tell me that they were constantly full, that there was nothing that folks could do, that people had to be triaged in the emergency room and then turned back out in their hospital gowns, and that is unacceptable. It is not enough for the city to just purchase beds or create facilities. We also have to support our healthcare workers and making sure that things are properly staffed. That means paying people a livable wage so that we can recruit people to these jobs. That means also making sure that we're funding these programs adequately so that they are appropriately staffed, because what ends up happening is people burn out and then folks don't get the services that they need and we create chaos in our streets. That's why I'm proudly endorsed by SEIU UHW, SEIU CIR, and many other healthcare workers in this race.
On the public health challenge that San Francisco is facing that is probably more serious than anything we have faced since the height of the AIDS crisis. Last week, I proposed, along with Supervisor Raphael Mandelman and Supervisor Catherine Stephanie, an ambitious roadmap called San Francisco Recovers that seeks to address the record-shattering crisis in drug overdose deaths, together with the criminal justice aspects of that deal with drug dealing and other kinds of things. It is an ambitious program. I spent 4 months reaching out to national leaders like David Kennedy from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York, Bo Kilmer from the RAND Corporation, who worked with my predecessor, Supervisor Haney, on the street-level drug dealing task force, Mike Marshall from Oregon Recovers, and many others, to identify the things that have worked in other cities, including European cities that have done a better job of addressing the challenges, the public health, and the criminal justice challenges that go along with this complicated issue. What we did are we're asking 21 city departments to report back to the Board of Supervisors within 90 days on the steps they could take, what resources they need to do what other cities are doing. This is important to me. You can count on the fact that this is never going to be an issue of the month for me. It's why I'm here. It is nothing less for me than the obligation of my own survival.
Miss Billy Cooper.
Sherelle didn't want to give me the mic. Yes, public health. Honey, I'm glad you brought it up. You know, public health is I remember 40 years ago, public health was a big issue then. And it's crazy that it's still a big issue now. I mean, we're in the richest country in the world. Why don't we have universal health care? You know, poor, marginalized people basically don't get the right diagnosis. They get pushed out of hospitals, like my fellow Board of Supervisors, y'all said. Candidate said, thank you. I'm a little nervous. But I'm the face of one of those people who got misdiagnosed for years. I know what it's like. I know what, like I said earlier, it's people that do, it's cities that do, and the cities that don't. San Francisco, wake up. We know exactly what we have to do. But it's a shame that they haven't done it yet. So I'm here for change. Do we want 12 more years of the same politics that we just left? Do we want 12 years of the same nothing that was there before? It's time for change. You know, put someone like me, someone from the other side of the tracks in City Hall. you know, let me bring up my game. Let me show you what I can do.
Thank you. That's how it always feels up here, doesn't it? So returning to the topic of affordable housing, how can new construction in areas like Soma be used to address the problem of housing for low-income and unhoused individuals and families? We'll begin with Honey Mahogany.
Thank you. Again, this is something that has heavily impacted my community. As a Black person who grew up here in San Francisco, I've been really shaken and appalled to see how many Black people have been forced out of the city, including many of my family members. When we first moved here, when I was born here and many of my cousins were born here, there were about 30 of us in the city, and now there's only 2 of us left in all of San Francisco, and people just keep getting pushed further and further east. I've spent the last 20 years working on this issue, whether it be fighting to get rental subsidies in place so that people can afford to stay housed, which we know is the most cost-effective way of preventing homelessness and crisis. In the last 4 years as Chief of Staff to Supervisor Haney, again, I've worked on affordability issues with the 30 Right Now legislation that we passed, but also in preserving units in Soma, making units permanently affordable by the city acquiring them, whether it be through the small site program or the purchase of large-scale buildings like the Panoramic, for example, so that it could be used for people transitioning out of homelessness. The city must do more, and I am committed to finding new streams of funding to fund deeply affordable housing in District 6. We've said yes to so much, including navigation centers, and we need more. We need places for people to transition out of homelessness. We have them, and we need more. But not only in District 6, I will be fighting to make sure that the rest of the city does its part. We absolutely need the rest of the city to step up and continue to support the work that we need to do to get folks off the streets and into housing.
I think it is a sad commentary on San Francisco's failure to produce enough housing and enough affordable housing that it is going to be the state of California that is finally going to make this happen. And not just for San Francisco, but I think the state legislature and the governor have had it with municipalities that are not doing their part and doing more to stymie progress rather than shape it. In the next 8 years, through the 6-cycle housing element, our city has to build 82,000 units of housing. About 40% of that has to be affordable at different levels of affordability. And we're gonna have to have some serious conversations about not just, if we can't get, right now we can't get a 4-plex legislation through the Board of Supervisors, we're gonna be needing to talk about 10-plex. That is something that I reached out to the Department of Planning on to make sure that we can do things like local versions of State Senator Scott Wiener's SB 10 and SB 50 that are ambitious, that are bringing solutions as big as our problems. If we're gonna hope to make progress on affordable housing, we have to think that big. We have to think that creatively. And if we don't, the consequences of failure are immense. We could lose state funding for transit, we could lose state funding for affordable housing, and we could lose local control altogether. That'll all disproportionately affect District 6, which is why I'm going to be a champion for affordable housing in the Board of Supervisors.
Ms. Billy Cooper?
Low-income housing, low-income housing. Why don't people say low-income housing? Why is it affordable housing? Affordable housing is not low-income housing. My constituents, my people can barely afford to live in the SROs, can barely afford a studio somewhere. So many people in San Francisco are on disability, Social Security, SSI, unemployment. Can't nobody afford. You gotta have something set into place where they're allowed to pay 30% of their income. So many apartments here in District 6, buildings in District 6 or condominiums have been empty for years while people are dying on the street. We don't really know the correct number of people that die on the street, whether it's from fentanyl or whether it's from heroin or whether it's from crack. We need to sit down at the table. Listen, San Francisco people, we need to sit down at the table and create better policies. Y'all know exactly what y'all not doing. Come on now. I don't got to sit here and keep digging a hole, and, hoping that it's going to get filled up with housing for people. We need low-income housing. I hate that word, affordable housing, because I couldn't afford affordable housing. Before I got my Section 8, low-income housing from Section 8 was the one thing that changed my life, and it can change many more people's lives too.
Yeah, so we've got to address this issue. Yes, we do need to build housing, right, here in the city. What we're not addressing, though, is the fact that a lot of folks need good paying jobs, right, to live here, to afford here. And if we've got to work with these industries and these companies out here that are providing providing good wages for employees. We've got to think about it in that regard as well. Because if people have good paying jobs, they're able to afford their housing, right? They're able to pay their rent and their bills and put food on the table. So we also have to address that. And I think you also are alluding to ensuring that not only are we addressing and making sure that there's enough housing available, that we create rates that are at the rate in which people are obtaining their funding. So the average amount of people here in the city, how much are they making, right? So we need to be looking at that as well. And then correlating that with the kind of pricing that we need to have available for folks. And I think that would make it a more competitive, not a competitive, but more available and accessible for folks. And addressing issues like ensuring that we reduce, I won't go into that. I'll just say that the last part is that I want to make sure that we provide affordable housing, that make it available, ensure that people have the resources they need to afford it, and create a lower income housing as well.
How are you going to meet the needs of all of the constituents, including the new ones, of your district after the recent redistricting process? I'm going to begin with Matt Dorsey.
So this is interesting. I was one of the board members of Mid-Market Neighbors during the redistricting process, and the concerns that those of us in Mid-Market had was that redistricting risked taking a neighborhood that is defined by Market Street and then dividing that neighborhood by Market Street. We were opposed to splitting Tenderloin off. The most elegant solution was actually to keep Tenderloin and South of Market together. Candidly, when I was having a conversation early on about whether whether the mayor might want to talk to me about being appointed or being interviewed to be appointed, I actually assumed, because the rationale for my own candidacy for the Board of Supervisors was so based in the drug crisis that's raging in the Tenderloin and South of Market, I assumed that when redistricting happened and the two districts were split, that I wouldn't be the appointee. It is still relevant to SOMA. But one of the things that we have to remember as supervisors is we may be elected from districts, but we serve the city. And I have made a commitment to my colleague, Dean Preston, that I will be the best supervisor the Tenderloin never elected. And I invite him to be the best supervisor South of Market never elected. We have the ability to work together on a lot of things. We will disagree on some things. But on the things we agree on for our neighborhoods, we can be joined at the hip, and I'm going to be I'm going to continue being that kind of supervisor.
Ms. Billy Cooper.
Still didn't give me the microphone. The redistricting, it's horrible. It's horrible because I had to move. I lived right on Geary. I lived on the last street that was in District 6. I had to move south of Market to run for District 6 supervisor. I wasn't going to let that stop me after 40 years living in District 6. I wasn't going to let myself be pushed out and the Office of Election telling me I couldn't, get sworn in to run for District 6. So I had to move. And I'm sure I'm not the only person who had to move because of their subsidy or because of their lifestyle. But the Tenderloin is my home. The Tenderloin is was all that I knew. Before I knew it was District 6, it was just the Tenderloin. And I'm making the promise right now. I'm gonna be rolling my sleeves up, going out, talking to people, going to talk to different property managements and developers and get things right. Because we cannot continue to keep leaving people on the doorstep, on the curb, outside. We have to bring everybody in. It really saddens me to see people sleeping on pallets and mattresses and blankets. It really saddens me for all the people that the city is just pushing towards one area that are out there selling drugs and using drugs. We have to find them. We have to create a better, cohesive way.
Okay. Yeah, this is a time where we need to ensure that we're inclusive, making it open, working with our other Board of Supervisors to ensure it's inclusive. We have a very diverse San Francisco. This is a place where we can, ensure that it stays and remains inclusive, making sure people feel invited, supported, right? These are our neighbors. We need to start acting like it and make sure that people have what they need, the resources, invest in them, recenter folks and people here in the city, ensure that people feel comfortable. And I think that we can all agree that we want the best for San Francisco, but we also want the best for District 6. And the way that we do that is to continue to make sure that we're providing the resources we need in order to uplift our communities, making sure our disadvantaged and underserved communities have the resources that they need, but also making sure that we bounce back from the pandemic, right? Making sure that our business industries are invested in, right? So that they can, our small businesses, and they can make sure that they are uplifted in that regard too. And I think we can do that full-heartedly and make sure we're safe at doing it too. So that's what I believe.
For me, this is a very personal question. I spent the last 4 years working as Chief of Staff in the District 6 office and have had the opportunity to work really, really deeply with a lot of community groups throughout SOMA and Treasure Island. But for me, this goes back way further. I've spent the last 20 years working as a social worker in this district, in the south of Market, in the Tenderloin as well. And unfortunately, we did lose the Tenderloin as a part of the redistricting process. But in some ways, that does lessen the load a little bit and allow us to really concentrate on some of the other parts of the district. So the West SOMA, Central SOMA, the East Cut, Mission Bay, Treasure Island, Showplace Square. I mean, all of the rest of District 6 deserves a lot of attention and needs that attention in order for us to recover from the pandemic. Again, as a small business owner, I know the struggles of many of the small businesses in this neighborhood, and I've worked with many of small businesses, whether it be wine bars like Decant, or whether it be bars like Oasis, or the Eagle, or restaurants, many other organizations. I have deep roots with working with the Filipino community in the south of Market, whether it be SOMCAN or Soma Pilipinas or West Bay or United Playas. I've worked with all of the CBDs, both from Soma West to East Cut to Mid-Market and Civic Center CBD, downtown CBD. And there is an intricate network of support systems that can be bolstered and utilized to best serve this district.
The next question. According to the CDC and San Francisco government data, there were 297 fatal drug overdoses in San Francisco between January and June, 15% of which occurred in SOMA. What is your plan to address this issue? I'll begin with Ms. Billy Cooper.
As someone who used to run the streets using drugs, I know it's and purchasing drugs off the street, I know it's and I've been clean for 20 years. So it was real difficult for me to get clean and sober. We have to continue to be better at meeting people where they're at. The people that are selling drugs on the street to the people that are sitting right next to them, even if we were to arrest all the drug dealers, the people on the street, when you're a dope addict or when you're an addict, you know where to go get drugs at, whether it's right next door to you or whether it's a couple miles away. We need to utilize people that are clean and sober for numerous years to help, get the people into recovery. But everybody doesn't want recovery, and we can't force recovery on people. But we need to have a plan laid out for people in addiction that want recovery and that want it, that want to use it, that wants to utilize it, and hopefully to have a better way of life. But then we can't really say that somebody's life, that their life, I can't say that another addict's life is screwed up. I don't know where that person is coming from. I can't say that. I will never say that. But as an ex-addict, as someone who used for over 25 years, I'm gonna do everything in my power to get out there and help the people. Like I said, I'm gonna roll up my sleeves and I'm gonna be out there.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Sherelle Jackson.
Yes, so we need to invest in self-harm reduction models. We do this already in some of our private sector as well, in our nonprofits. We also need to make sure that there's a heavy investment in our clinicians and clinical facilities, as well as our hospital and healthcare providers that are already providing substance abuse prevention and also mental health care. We need to make sure that they have the resources they need in order to conduct their job. We also need to invest in our community safety options and also ensure that we have those resources available. And we recognize some other issues that need to happen, like investment in our community ambassadors. I said that already, but I want to make sure that I indicate that. And then investment in making sure that we establish transitional programs for those that are ready to, begin the process of uplifting themselves out of these conditions into better conditions to build back their life, because that's really what we're looking at. Folks that are struggling, continuing to have this sort of cycle in and out of jail systems and things of that nature. We got to invest and make sure that there's opportunities for them to get into jobs and workplaces that they are eligible to work at. And if we're not building up their skills in order for them to be eligible for jobs, we're going to continue to see a cycle of folks just struggling on the streets because we're not investing to ensure that they have jobs in this workforce. And we've got to full recenter and focus in that regard. Thank you.
Yes, we have had a huge drug problem in San Francisco for a long time, and with the introduction of fentanyl, it has become even more deadly. Unfortunately, we have not done a good job of addressing the needs. This is something that goes back decades. Again, as a social worker, someone who's worked for 20 years on some of these issues, getting folks off the streets into recovery, my very first job was being an outreach counselor for Larkin Street Youth Services. I've seen what it looks like on the ground, and over the last 4 years working in City Hall, I've seen some of the ways in which the city has failed to respond. The city has failed to listen to providers who know the work, who know how to get folks into care, who know how to keep people in recovery and how to help people succeed. It has chronically underfunded many of these programs. And sure, you can purchase 100 beds, but if you're only funding enough clinicians to get 10 of them staffed, then guess what? You're only serving 10 patients. So I believe that we need to fully fund Mental Health San Francisco. This is legislation that I actively worked on as an aide and chief of staff in Supervisor Haney's office. We also need to, I also want to acknowledge that we did work to establish a state of emergency. I wrote the resolution establishing the state of emergency here in San Francisco around overdose deaths, and that I supported the TL emergency and the establishment of the TLC, the center, which basically served as a safe consumption site. And I am very, very, very in favor of overdose prevention sites as a way to deal with the issue. We need accountability on our streets for the people there, but first and foremost, we need accountability for the city.
So the loss of life is staggering. Since the advent of COVID, we have lost about 900 San Franciscans to COVID-19 and about 1,700 to drug overdoses. 75% of those fatalities to drug overdoses are attributable to one drug, fentanyl. The minimum lethal overdose of fentanyl is about 2 milligrams. Our police department is in the Tenderloin is taking, will by the year's end take about 55 kilos of fentanyl off the street, which is enough to wipe out the population of the San Francisco Bay Area twice over. What's terrifying to me is that on the East Coast there are Narcan-resistant synthetic opioids. God forbid, if that comes here, we will have a public health calamity that is worse than the AIDS crisis. That is why I asked for this job. It's why I proposed the most ambitious and far-reaching plan that I have seen, or and the experts that I've talked to have seen since this crisis started here. It includes aggressive public health strategies like treatment on demand, 24/7 intake. It includes taking a serious look at the things we need to do with the criminal justice system to make a meaningful intervention. It's right to recovery programs. It's sober New Deal programs to give people purpose who are early in recovery, and it's making sure that we expand our transparency so that our city has a better handle on what it's doing right and what it's doing wrong.
Next question. What is your position on Proposition B? This is the one about the Public Works Department and Commission, Sanitation and Streets Department and Commission. For this one, I'm going to begin with Cheryl Jackson.
While I haven't taken a formal position on this, I do believe that we need to ensure that we provide resources for our public utilities. We need to make sure that we're also working to ensure our city is a safe, clean, and efficient, and it's got to operate in that respect, in that regard. That means making sure that our streets are on a regular basis being cleaned. Making sure that we invest in our environmentally and friendly options that will help not cause too many toxins while they are conducting business, ensuring that there are resources available for that as well, and then also supporting different operations within the internal system that needs also some assistance there, especially making sure that people will begin to trust the system and the department again, and making sure that those resources are available.
Well, I think everyone who ever has visited downtown San Francisco or the Tenderloin or many other neighborhoods in San Francisco will tell you that the state of our streets is unacceptable. The smell of urine, the smell of feces, sometimes stepping in it. The number one thing that children in the Tenderloin fear is not drug dealers, it's poop. This is done from a study that we did in the Tenderloin. And this is something that I have worked extensively on as a chief of staff in the District 6 office. That's why we actually did research all over the country, talked to the workers of DPW, to talk to everyone we could, the CBDs, et cetera, business owners. And what we did was we listened to all of that feedback and created the original Proposition B, which the voters passed by 66%, establishing a Department of Sanitation and Streets to be laser focused on getting our streets clean. And yes, it may cost $7 million extra a year, but if that means that we have better oversight, if that means that we have people running DPW and the Department of Sanitation and Streets who are qualified to do that work, if we can eliminate corruption and we can actually get our streets clean, then that $7 million out of a $14 billion budget will have been well worth it, because tourism and our small businesses and the revitalization of our city depends on us succeeding at this. Listen, we need to give the Department of Sanitation and Streets a shot. It is just about to launch. We should listen to the will of the voters, and if it doesn't work, then we should change it. But this new Proposition B removes many of the protections against corruption, as well as destroying the new department.
So I am actually supporting Proposition B this time, and I think this is giving voters an opportunity to take a second look at something that is going to cost needlessly $7 million. One of the observations I have made of city government over the years, and this certainly is something that we're seeing in what we looked at with some of the drug policies, but I think it applies citywide. The problem with inefficient delivery of city services is too often something that's attributable to siloing, and making us more siloed isn't helpful. And when I'm talking to people I respect, like Rachel Gordon, who is very knowledgeable about the Department of Public Works, Supervisor Aaron Peskin, and Aaron and I have some disagreements on some policy issues, but when it comes to the efficient delivery of city services and public integrity, Aaron is somebody whose judgment I trust, and he had some buyer's remorse about this, and when we both looked at this hard, we concluded that we should go back to voters. I think we can keep the best of both worlds with both oversight commissions, but I'm also convinced, that public integrity is important to me. I was part of the public integrity team in the city attorney's office in 2004 that did the first report on Mohamed Nuru when he was running the San Francisco League of Urban Gardeners. So I'm familiar with it, and I take it equally seriously. I think Proposition B as written keeps the oversight, keeps commissions, but doesn't mean we're spending $7 million needlessly to further silo these functions.
The same question? With Proposition B, I feel as though Proposition B needs to include more street toilets, especially in south of Market and the Tenderloin. If we have more places that people can use the bathroom, they won't be shitting on the street. People will use those bathrooms. It was a study in the neighborhood about there's not that many people shooting up in the bathrooms anymore. They done moved to the streets to shoot up and use their drugs. But if we have more bathrooms, rather than every 2 years, someone is buying these $20,000 garbage cans and put toilets out there where people can use them. You know, I would love to see south of Market on 8th Street, 8th and Mission, where I live at. I would love to see one of those green toilets there. You know, I would love to see a toilet down by 6th and Howard. I would love to see a toilet going down by 5th and Bryant somewhere. You know, I don't understand why they only have them in certain areas. I know the city can't afford to do it if they want it, but that's why so much doesn't get done, because different offices and different agencies of the city create all this policy for the red tape so they don't have to do it and serve the people. So if elected supervisor, I'm gonna change all that. I'm gonna be out there with my people. I'm gonna be talking to everybody I can in City Hall.
Thank you, Ms. Billy Cooper. All right, the next one. Citywide Case Management, a District 6-based partnership between UCSF and the city and county, provides care to over 1,500 people experiencing serious mental illnesses every year. What more should be done to help those with unmet mental health needs? And as supervisor, what specific actions will you take to address the ongoing mental health crisis playing out in our streets? I'll begin with Honey Mahogany.
Thank you. Again, I feel like a little bit of a broken record here, but I have worked for the last 20 years as a social worker in this city, and I've seen a lot. But again, I will say that we need to actually fully fund mental health SF. That means that we will be getting our beds fully funded, but it also means that we will be funding enough staff to actually deal with the need. We have thousands of people on our streets currently in mental health crisis who cannot get the care that they need. We have thousands of people on our streets right now who could be getting into recovery, who could be using up recovery beds. Now, I think that we need to first make sure that the services are in place and are strong enough to actually meet the need. And then we need to work on enforcement and setting boundaries on our streets. We need to let people know that, no, they cannot continue to use drugs on our streets. That is, in fact, illegal. We have to set those boundaries. If it means that we have to resort to conservatorship in order to get those folks who are so out of their minds that they cannot take care of themselves, then that should be a tool at our disposal. But first, we need to actually make sure that we are fully funding these services and that we have a variety of services where people can actually come in at the place where they're ready. Not everything is recovery is not a one-size-fits-all model. We need options for people, a lot of options, so that something can work for them.
I agree that mental health SF, I think, is a promising program, and I do think this is something that needs to be a part of. When I talked about the San Francisco Recover strategy, I want to make sure that that is a part of it. One thing that I think is going to be very important in terms of what I have heard from clinicians who are out in the street dealing with many of these issues is that it's often difficult for them to know whether someone is presenting in a mental health crisis or a drug-induced crisis, because it will present the same way. I'm convinced that if we can make some progress on the drug use, acting out, kind of open-air drug scene issues related to this, we will be better empowered and more effective in how we're dealing with people who are gravely mentally ill. I think that, when I have talked to Vitka Eisen at Health Right 360, some of this is about staffing capacity. We have beds that they're recovery beds, but there's also mental health capacity. If we don't have the ability to staff this, the beds are useless to us. And that's why one of the things that I'm proposing is a sober New Deal. For people who are new in recovery, who are committed to staying in recovery, I'm reaching out to, we have jobs training programs. I've reached out to Jose Cisneros about starting either a grant program or student loan program, because the best drug counselors are peer counselors. The best drug counselors I've ever had are the one, and personally, are the ones who've been through it themselves.
I wish I could drop names like Matt Dorsey does. It's dreadful. It's really dreadful. And for the last 12 years, nothing has worked, because it's the same way it was from 2000. 22 years of the same horrible issues on the street, and no one has created an antidote to solve the problems on the street. It's going to take more than, with the open air drug dealing, it's going to take more than arresting the drug dealers. You don't need to arrest the people that are using the drugs. Get them help. There, just like Honey Mahogany and Matt Dorsey just said, there are different levels of homelessness and there are different levels of mental health capacity. I was out there. When I was out there, they finally decided to listen to me. You can't give me a cohesive mental health diagnosis if I'm crazy, drugged out, if I come to your office drugged out. And you have to see people for more than 5 or 10 minutes. That's another issue. We have to see people that come looking for help more than 5 or 10 minutes. You know, we have to change the system and the way people look at things when it's really helping people, if you really want to help people.
So as an essential worker, we worked closely with the UCSF case managers, and some of the clientele and those who are needing services, you have to make sure that those benefits are available and to help them get the housing that they need in order to pay for it. So that on one end, that's the work that we were doing, ensuring that we're working with getting them the resources they need in order to obtain services. And so under that, we need to make sure that we invest in protections for those workers, especially burnout, right? Mental health, and making sure that there is resources in that regard. I also would like to see that the nonprofit and department relations between all of these different sectors are working cohesively together. What I mean by that is the software and the technologies, the data that is being provided to the service workers, not everybody has access to that. So people are operating within their own departments, providing those resources. So when you know that something's available, such as housing, you'll be able to look that up and be able to see that within the city's district. In order to do that, we have to provide the funding and software and training, because employees need that in order to conduct the job and make sure that they have a better job in doing so and providing services. So I want to see that across the board. So that's making sure that nonprofits and all these different departments that are working on homeless and housingness have that software to work back and forth with each other.
Thanks, Sherelle. So the next question, what are your top community safety concerns for your district? I'll begin with Matt Dorsey.
Well, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I'm going to actually skip you've all heard about San Francisco Recovers and why that's a personal priority for me, but I'll tell you one of the other ones that's important, because I don't think we can accomplish much if we don't solve the police staffing crisis. There is a national phenomenon, and this is not strictly limited to San Francisco, but San Francisco is feeling a staffing crunch in its police department that is problematic. It is 25% understaffed. And what that means is that the work that Chief of Police Bill Scott has been doing over the last 5 or 6 years to create a department that aspires to be a model of 21st century policing, the work that came out of the reason that the San Francisco Police Commission did a nationwide search to find a chief of police like Bill Scott, was because of what the kind of reform that our police department needed to do, given all the problems it had several years ago. We can't fulfill the promise of that if everybody's running to the next priority, 911 call. It's about community policing, it's about building trust, it's about recruiting from the communities that serve us. I think there's a lot of promise there. I will say that the last couple of police academy classes are more diverse than ever before in San Francisco history, but we just don't have enough police officers. So that's going to be something. We don't solve many public safety problems if we can't solve that.
Ms. Billy Cooper.
Thank you, Sherelle Jackson. I felt so safe in my neighborhood when I saw police walking through the neighborhood. What you call that? I forget what it's called. What do you call that? Foot patrol. I felt real safe when I felt a more cohesively sense of safety seeing the police walking through the neighborhoods and getting to know the neighbors and the store owners, the people that run the shops and everything. We need more of that. We need people to clean the streets more. We really do. People have to clean. The city and county of San Francisco needs to clean the streets more, because when they clean it once a week or once every 2 weeks, by the time they come back, it's really screwed up. I think we do. I know it's probably going to kill my career, but I think we do need more police also. I really do. And we need police that are culturally sensitively trained and cultural competency trained, because people that look like me, when we call the police, the numbers are high that we have more, the police give us more problems. We get more pushback from the police, and some different agencies in the Tenderloin and South of Market have found out that the police don't always write up a report when it's certain people in the community that are called.
Thank
so
you.
we
I'm
need
going
to
to
take
go
care
on
of that.
to Sherelle Jackson. Sorry, I just called stop. Is that what just happened? Yes.
You told me to stop.
Yeah. Oh, so what are your top community safety concerns for your district?
Sorry about that. So my top community safety concerns is, number one, we need to invest in our community safety ambassadors throughout the district. I think they're doing a wonderful job. So if you're out there walking around and you see a community safety ambassador, they're probably out there providing food and help to our homeless individuals that are experiencing homelessness, and also to those who are underserved and underprivileged. You also see them, from street to street, trying to make sure that we feel a bit more safer out there. And so I want to continue to ensure that as well. I also want to make sure that we invest in our harm reduction. I think that that's incredibly important as far as addressing some of the issues we kind of mentioned before, which was our mental health and substance abuse. Those that are experiencing that, they need to have those resources as well. And then lastly, we need to ensure that we continue to look at ways in which we invest in more safety for our other industries and businesses who need to feel supported within the community, and also our residential. They need to feel supported and safe while they're residing in their homes. And some of them looking out their window and feeling unsafe is not the ideal situation. And so we want to make sure that folks feel safe and that our streets are cleaned. And I think that we can do that together and working together and getting this done. Thank you.
Again, I think that everyone here knows that we have a safety crisis in our streets. As someone who has been working in SOMA, who owns a small business in SOMA, who lives in SOMA, I can give you many personal accounts of times where I or my friends have been physically threatened. As someone who, again, owned a bar and who has shut down that bar many a times when I was bartending late at night, it does feel unsafe. We have had people break into the bar, people destroy property, and we've had staff that have been threatened. I've had friends that were hit in the head with golf clubs and had their skulls fractured, people who've had their arms broken, people who were shot in the leg, all within SOMA. So this is very personal for me. I agree that police are a part of the solution here. Listen, I have family in SFPD. You don't grow up in San Francisco and not know a lot of people who are active police officers. But I also believe that we need to hold SFPD accountable, because I can't tell you how many times I heard from small business owners and residents that the police were there and didn't do anything. And that is unacceptable. That should not be tolerated, and we need to get to the bottom of that. Because I do believe that police salaries will go up. That is a part of normal labor negotiations. We do need to hire new officers, but we also need someone in the District 6 supervisor seat who's going to hold them accountable, and that person is me.
Thank you all for your answers. So with more affordable family housing being built at the former Trans Bay Center, what additional affordable services are needed, such as grocery stores, parks, and schools, and what are your plans to bring those to this community? I'll begin with Ms. Billy Cooper.
What center are you talking about?
The question that was submitted was referring to affordable family housing being built at the former Trans Bay Center.
Where's that at? That's Salesforce downtown. They're not going to build no housing down there.
The question is about what additional affordable services are needed, such as grocery stores, parks, and schools, and what are your plans to bring these to the community of your district?
Well, I'm going to roll my sleeves up and do everything I can, even if I'm not elected District 6 supervisor, to get low-income housing down there, to get school, to get training for individuals, to get job trainings, to make it more cohesive for people to go back to school. I've been here for 40 years, and how come we don't have a Safeway or something in District 6 or in the Tenderloin? People that live in District 6 and the Tenderloin don't really get a chance to have fresh fruit and vegetables, don't get a chance to have a chance to have, fresh, to have produce that is probably not a couple days old. I've noticed that, they had to make people put the fruit and vegetables on the inside because the sun was messing up everything. And I remember looking at the fruit sometime and it was horrible. Just to make it more simpler and easy for people to have more affordability to a better way of life. That's what people really need. So many people on the street that we pass by and ignore and don't say hi to are just looking for a better way of life, are just looking to be different, something different, looking to step up. If more people reach back and help a person or a couple people move forward, this would be a much better city, I think.
So I think what we have to do, as far as the parks go, we're going to have to work closely with our SX Park and Rec, right? Make sure that they have the resources they need to conduct some method of planning in regards to making sure that parks are available in this district. But also, I think that we need to look at also investing in community farming, okay, and also farmers markets in the area. I think that that's going to provide the fresh fruits that the other candidate was mentioning as well. And also making sure that as we begin to grow, because that is something that's going to happen, for fiscal year after fiscal year, we're going to be forecasted to have more of a larger population of folks who want to eventually lay their ground roots here and settle in here. And we have to acknowledge that those that are already residing here, we're going to have to invest in those folks first. And what I mean by that is there's families that are trying to grow here already. And we have to invest in schools and education to make sure that those are readily available for those as well. Because, if there's not enough schools in the district, you're going to see other schools that are going to be overpopulated. People aren't going to have quality teaching and education, and we already have concerns there as regard. So we need to make sure that we're looking at this full circle and operating in a way that we're successful at it, looking at future years, looking at how many people are going to be in the area, and getting it done. Thank you.
For me, we definitely need to focus on building much more deeply affordable housing in the district and also making sure that we meet the needs of those residents. And that absolutely means making sure that we get a school in there in Mission Bay. That also means making sure that we have childcare available in the district. And we do, but we need more. I worked as chief of staff to the previous supervisor, Matt Haney. I worked extensively with Rec and Park to actually find new parks in South of Market, to find pieces of property that we could purchase and turn into green open space, because District 6 is one of the districts with the least amount of green space per resident in the entire city. And we know that that has negative health outcomes. We know that people need more green space to enjoy with their families, to exercise. And also, you know, so we need to make sure that we are doing that work. It's something that I have done for the last 4 years and will continue to do. Additionally, I will just mention that having affordable, deeply, truly affordable food that is healthy to be able to purchase is something that is truly rare in Soma. Many of the grocery stores are unaffordable to many of the families. Many of them end up shopping at food smarts or some of the smaller chain stores. And we have programs to help actually have fresh groceries in some of those smaller markets, but we need to do more. And so I will be working with the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, Office of Small Business, to increase the number of supermarkets and fresh food that's available in the South of Market.
This is actually a really great question. And the reason it is because if we accomplish what we're hoping to accomplish in the new housing element cycle over the next 8 years, everything you think you know about wealthy neighborhoods is going to change. If we're going to fulfill the promise of affordability on site, it means that what may look like an upscale neighborhood is actually going to have a lot of people with low incomes. It's going to have a lot of socioeconomic diversity, and we have to make sure that they're not priced out of the neighborhood because they can live there because it's affordable, but nothing else is. So we have to do more on this. I think open space is a part of it. One thing that I'm working on with some small business community leaders and some of the small stores where people might go to buy lottery tickets or cigarettes is the ability to have all of those small businesses pool their resources to have access to things like organic produce if they're purchasing it together. This is a pilot program this is a program actually that New York City has done very successfully, and I'm working with Miriam Zazunis and some other folks, and I'm dropping another name, Billy, but it is exciting, and it's something that we have to do. If we're going to have affordable housing, that means we're going to have socioeconomic diversity in neighborhoods that don't look like they need, services that are low cost, but they do.
Thank you. I'm moving to our final 2 questions, and then we'll move to statements. I'll give you another reminder. According to the city's own figures, it will cost $19 billion over the next 8 years to build the affordable housing required by the state's regional housing needs allocation goals. Where will that money come from? And how do we balance opportunities for market rate housing against the state requirements for affordable housing? Begin with Sherelle Jackson.
Well, this is already a complex issue. There's a lot of concerns that we need to address, and we've got to be compliant. We've got to make sure the regulations are in place, but also to ensure that we continue to invest in affordable housing, we have to address those stipulations head on. I think it's about working with coalitions of folks, making sure that we're working with different departments in order to address this. This means heavily that we invest in making sure that we're working as a team cohesively to make decisions about building more affordable housing. But I also think we also need to be working closely with the state, listening to the legislators, making sure that we're working to ensure that we resolve this so that we can move forward. I think if we're not doing that, making sure we recognize the differences there and the conflicts that are within, we will have some concerns and we'll continue to have concerns. So we've got to move faster and making sure that we have those decisions, have those conversations, bringing everyone to the table to invest in more housing, and we've got to do it at a quicker rate than we have been before. Thank you.
I'm glad that we're talking about the RHNA goals. I think that they're very important, and specifically highlighting the lack of affordable housing that has been built in San Francisco. This is not just a San Francisco issue. This is not just a statewide issue. This is a this is a national issue. And interestingly enough, the federal government used to be much more involved in building housing and in building affordable housing across the country. And as chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party, we have been fighting to really make sure that we are electing more Democrats across the country so that we can get get packages passed that actually meet the needs of the people. And I think that we will need to do that. We'll need to continue to get Democrats elected across the country. We'll have to push our federal representatives here in San Francisco and in the state of California to do more, to bring resources back, to build more densely, build more housing, especially affordable housing and social housing here in San Francisco. We need those federal dollars to come back to us because we pay into it. We pay a lot of federal taxes. We also need the state to do its part. So that means working with, Assemblymember Matt Haney, Senator Scott Wiener, Assemblymember Phil Ting, and all of our representatives to make sure that we're bringing the billions of dollars that San Francisco produces for the state back here to build affordable housing. And we have to prioritize and streamline the way in which we do that. Again, we're gonna continue to see people come to San Francisco from across the country seeking refuge. And even in the state of California, as climate change continues to wreak havoc, we're gonna have more and more people coming to places like San Francisco that are still livable, and we need to make sure that we build to be able to take up that capacity.
Matt Dorsey.
When I said that I see the role of a District 6 supervisor as being the conscience of housing on the Board of Supervisors, in part it's about the local, what we need to do to make sure that we're building housing at all income levels and in all parts of the city in every district. But it also means that we have to be, the District 6 supervisor also has to be a fierce advocate for funding. If the state is going to make municipalities do this, do the most ambitious set of goals in housing production since World War II, we had better do it right. We had better do it equitably, and we had better make sure that the state is held accountable for helping municipalities live up to the promise of this. What worries me, I actually think that we're going to be able to get for very low income, which is around less than 50% AMI, and low income, which is about 50 to 80% AMI. I think we will have governmental support for that. But there's another category in there in the RHNA goals that's the middle. It's like the moderate low income that's about 80 to 120. That is going to be very difficult to get funding for because right now, state and federal funding doesn't really look at that. We're going to have to be creative with things like social housing, group housing. I think everything has to be on the table to get creative about how we're going to do it, but we have to fulfill the promise of this.
Sure. According to the city's own figures, it will cost $19 billion over the next 8 years to build the affordable housing required by the state's regional housing needs allocation goals. Where will that money come from, and how do we balance opportunities for market race housing against the state requirements for affordable housing?
Well, once again, I'm a beat that pink elephant in the middle of the room again. Low income housing, we have to stop saying, well, we could say affordable housing for low income housing, or we just got to stop mentioning affordable housing because so many people still are going to get left out. So many people can't afford affordable housing. Here in San Francisco, you have to make at least $140,000 a year to have a sustainable life here. Some people are getting less than $10,000 a month here. I mean, a year. We have to create more low-income housing, and we have to hold people accountable. We have to hold builders and developers and builders and developers responsible for not putting people in these buildings they build. The city has given people the right to opt out, to pay to opt out, to give apartments to low-income people. That's why so many low-income people are still on the street. We have to hold people accountable. We got to do audits, and we have to make sure these agencies are ethically doing the right thing to create and to give people a right chance to live.
And for our final question of the evening, before we move to closing statements, do you have a holistic strategy for public transportation for District 6, for both getting in and around the city and also commuting outside of the city? I'll begin with Honey Mahogany.
Absolutely. You know, I grew up in the outer Sunset, and every day, I actually grew up on Taraval and 43rd, and every day we would end up taking the L Taraval into the city, into downtown. My mom especially, who worked at that time in the Fillmore, would have to take the L Taraval every day. I know what a lifeline transit can be, especially to folks across the city, and we need to do so much more. District 6 is really lucky in that we have a lot of access to public transit, but unfortunately, aside from maybe the 14, most of it is not very reliable. Once you get south into the south of Market, and especially once you get to Treasure Island, it is pretty paltry, and I know that I have struggled to take public transit and oftentimes end up late because of the inconsistency. And so for me, as someone who worked as chief of staff to the former supervisor, Matt Haney, specifically on transit, we worked tirelessly to bring back certain lines like the 27 Bryant and the 31 Balboa to make sure that our residents were getting the service that they needed to get across the city. But we have to do more. We have to increase how often Muni comes. We have to make sure that it is reliable. And in addition to that, we have to make things safer. You know, District 6 is filled with high injury networks. That's why I worked so hard to build protected bike lanes, pedestrian bulb outs, scrambles, and more. And as District 6 supervisor, I'm committed to continuing to do that work to make District 6, instead of one of the most dangerous places to be a pedestrian or biker, one of the safest.
I think the downtown extension is one of the most important centerpieces that we could have of our transit system. With Caltrain electrification and getting the Caltrain to Salesforce Tower, to the transit center, so that our transit center is not the most expensive bus stop in the world. That will actually set the stage for hopefully high-speed rail. You know, when I talked earlier about the fact that the Bay Area has 27 different transit agencies, and there's a lot of difficulties with balkanization in that realm. About half of those agencies connect somewhere in District 6. So I think that the DTX, in addition to creating, I think it's going to be 60,000 jobs. I mean, this is going to be a very ambitious program that is going to be great for our economy, but it's also going to be a centerpiece of what we can do on transit. And I think that we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to set up Muni, our municipal transit agency, for success. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and I'm glad. I appreciate Chair Mahogany, because the one thing that we haven't talked about in safety is when we talk about safe streets in San Francisco, we're also talking about pedestrian safety. And I think that I'm glad that I was kind of hoping that would come up as a discrete question. So I'm glad it was mentioned, because we're going in the wrong direction on Vision Zero. And in my first week as supervisor, there was 2 weeks. There was a double fatality just a couple blocks away from me. We have to do better.
Ms. Billy Cooper?
Thank you. We need stricter laws for people that ride bikes in the bike lanes and for people that ride scooters. We need stricter laws so people will stay off the sidewalk with the scooters. We need stricter laws to make people stay off the sidewalk with their bikes. Just like Matt Dorsey was saying, where we live at, there have been numerous fatalities or old seniors getting hit and young people getting hit by these scooters and people on bikes. We need to MTA Muni needs people from the community. If I'm elected District 6 supervisor, I will make it my purpose to bring in people, consumers from the neighborhood, to sit on the board with these people. Too many people make decisions for us that we're not included. We need to be at the table. I'm so tired of people making decisions to cut out a bus or reroute a bus and not telling seniors or not telling disabled people in wheelchairs or in canes and crutches. We have to hold people hands to the fire. We have to make them more accountable. Most of the people that are making decisions about these bus lines have drivers that don't even take the bus, don't even get on BART. We need to hold all these agencies accountable to bring people from the community to help make decisions.
Thank you.
So yes, we need to ensure that we're investing in our public transportation, absolutely. and continue to do so. I mean, people have to rely on this to get to and from work day in and day out, and we want to make sure that those resources are available for folks to get and use public transit. It's also environmentally friendly, right? So we need to make sure we continue to do that. I'd also like to see some upgrades happen. This means that some of the stops, we need to make sure that the cleanliness of the stops, as some folks, if you look at Civic Center, for example, we need to do a lot of upgrading and just reinvestment, ensuring that we just upgrade that entire section right there to provide a more cleanlier look and a more safer look, because people are walking down the stairs to get to public transit day in and day out. I can think about the city workers that have to go and use Civic Center day in and day out and constantly have to go up and down those stairs. It's not the safest, and it's not the cleanliest. And the reason being is because there are different substances and things of that nature that people have to step over. And I think a lot of people have tolerated it for so long. But those days are long over. We need to make sure that we upgrade and make sure that we continue to provide more trains, more efficient, fast running trains that are available for our BARTs, for our Muni, making sure that we invest in more operators, and we'll continue to work on this for the future. Thank you.
Thank you all. That was our final question from the audience. So now we're going to move to our closing statements from the candidates. These will also be 90 seconds long, and we will start in reverse alphabetical order with Matt Dorsey.
Thank you so much. I want to just repeat how grateful I am to the League of Conservation Voters and to UCSF. Last Friday was my 4-month anniversary of being a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, and I will say that I came in with some axes to grind, some good axes. There were some things that I really wanted to accomplish, and I'm proud of the San Francisco Recovers detailed strategy that we have that outlines an ambitious approach on criminal justice and public health, on right to recovery programs that'll encourage people to get on the other side of their addiction, on sober New Deal programs that'll help people who are in early recovery stay there, and also transparency initiatives that I talked about so that we know what we're doing. We're better educated on what we're doing. I also went to the mat to fight for the people who were flooded out of 33 Tehama to make sure that we had the 60 BMR folks who weren't sure where they were going to be. I made sure that I was elevating that to the city attorney to make sure that if there was any kind of business issue or unlawful business practice, that it was aggressively investigated. I also worked with the controller's office to get a report on how much untreated addiction costs our city, because I'm going to fight tirelessly to make sure that we fund everything we need to, but we need to know how much it's costing us not to solve those problems. And I'm the one who negotiated the agreement with Pride and our LGBTQ+ first responders so that we could have an inclusive Pride. I did this in 4 months. Give me 4 years, and let me show you what I can do.
Next, we'll have Honey Mahogany.
Thank you. Again, thank you to the League of Women Voters and also to UCSF and everyone who's here and watching at home. This has been a real honor to be able to be on this panel with all of these folks here. I'm a daughter of San Francisco. I grew up here. This is my home and a place that has welcomed my family and my community for many decades. This is a place that I want to see continue to be not just my home, but a home for many other people seeking refuge. I've spent the last 20 years working to make San Francisco a better place. As a social worker, I helped get folks off the streets and into housing, into recovery, helped work with those who were formerly incarcerated, helping them rebuild their lives and take accountability for crimes committed. I've spent the last 4 years working as chief of staff to the previous supervisor, working with countless community groups, residents, small businesses, on all the issues that matter most to the residents of District 6, whether it be public safety, homelessness, or building housing. We built 9,000 units of housing while I was there, helping to run land use for our office. That's more housing than all of the other districts combined and more affordable housing than all of the other districts combined. As chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party, I've registered countless voters and fought to get Democrats elected. And as a small business owner, I know the plight of many small businesses in our district. I bring so much perspective, so much deep love for San Francisco to this work, and I hope for the opportunity to serve as the next District 6 supervisor.
Thank you. Sherelle Jackson.
Thank you again for having me here. I have been absolutely excited and really in the past couple of days looking forward to this. And so, you know, I am going to continue to be dedicated and committed to ensuring that our underserved and marginalized are uplifted within District 6. I want to make sure that I'm a strong voice that's going to advocate for our seniors, our disabled, and veterans. I want to make sure that our women and our LGBTQ and BIPOC communities have the resources they need in order for their communities to be uplifted. Now is that time to bring forth someone that's going to do the work in District 6. That candidate is me, and I'll continue to uplift communities as much as I can throughout my time spent in the seat. And so let's ensure that you choose someone that is ready to and willing to uplift all of you. Listen to the work that you need done in your community because you know best. And I'm ready to do that work. Thank you so much.
Ms. Billy Cooper.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to UCSF. I am Miss Billy Cooper, and I can't make no promise. The only promise I can make is that I will every day roll my sleeves up to get out there to talk to people and to see what the people really need and to talk amongst my supervisors in City Hall and to talk to the mayor and have people, you know, like I keep saying, it's people that do and it's people that don't. We know so many people have gotten elected that didn't do jack, you know, because it's either they didn't care about the people or they didn't want to learn. Who's ever elected to District 6 supervisor, you have to learn about the people you're dealing with. It goes beyond 5 p.m. The job will go beyond 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. some days. You have to talk to the people that are going to put you in office. Not only the rich people, but the poor people. The poor people also, because poor people have a vote. Because I am one of those poor marginalized people, and I do have a vote. And if you see it, you hear it in my talk, and I hope you also listen and see it in my heart that I am serious and that I'm going to get work done. You know, I sometimes I get a little confused. Sometimes
Thank you, Ms. Billy Cooper.
Okay, let me
I'm gonna
finish.
call time right there.
Oh, I can't finish? Oh.
I can allow you to finish your sentence.
Sometimes I get confused. Sometimes I get my words twisted. But my heart is in the right place because I am one of the many faces of District 6. So thank you so much. And on November the 8th, vote.
It's a great segue for my closing. On behalf of myself and the League... On behalf of myself and the League of Women Voters of San Francisco, thank you to the candidates for participating this evening. And thanks to each of you watching at home and in the audience for taking the time to inform yourselves about your choices on November 8th. Please remember to register to vote if you haven't already and get 3 others to register as well. If you've changed your name or you've moved, you will need to register again at your new address. If you're voting by mail this year, please be sure to drop off your ballot at an official drop-off location or by mail on or before Election Day, November 8th. And for more information about what is on your ballot, including our ballot measures, you can go to lwvsf.org/vote. Thank you and good evening.